I'm extremely pleased to welcome my next guest to the show for his first appearance on Crowdsource the Truth, Shaun Attwood. How are you, Shaun?
Doing great. Just trying to keep up with all of this Epstein mania.
It's mania, all right. You know, Shaun, you've become a very popular YouTuber, you're an activist, and I think it's possible that many viewers on Crowdsource the Truth perhaps haven't seen you before. You were a stock market millionaire turned ecstasy kingpin. You're somewhat of the Walter White of Arizona, and you've been known as the Bank of England. You did a lengthy stint in federal prison, about 6 years, I believe, and you've learned your lesson from what I can observe. Why don't you give us just a quick background on how you got here?
I just made more money than I had common sense in my 20s. And I remember the rave scene in the UK and taking ecstasy. So I started to use my money to throw rave parties with it. You know, I was misguided. I was emotionally immature. I just thought I was keeping the party going. I didn't fully comprehend the harm that drugs cause to society until a team smashed my door down, and I ended up in this jail where gang members were murdering prisoners, guards were murdering prisoners. 90% of the prisoners were shooting up heroin and crystal meth, and I saw the horror of what drug use leads to. So I knew I couldn't change my past, but I resolved to go out and share my story in the hope young people wouldn't make my mistakes.
Yeah, and that's when I came to see you. I had watched an interview that Patrick Bet-David did with you, and I found the story fascinating. You've spent some time in ADX Florence. As I recall, this was due to a prosecutor accidentally or perhaps intentionally adding a massive sentence that wasn't accurate, and you wound up in one of the most high security prisons in the United States. Is that correct?
Okay, I was prosecuted by the state of Arizona. So I was in USP Florence, which is the graph that you're showing right now. The feds were part of the multi-agency investigation into my case, but they didn't prosecute me at the end of the day. So AS Florence is over in Colorado. That's where El Chapo is. That's where Sammy the Bull was. That's where John Gotti was. That is the supermax of supermaxes. But SMU in Florence, Arizona is still no joke. It is, you know, they come and to the door, the guards in body armor, shank-proof Darth Vader outfits and masks. And if you want to, all they basically let you out for is to take a shower every about 3 days. They handcuff you through the trap. They tell you as you walk into the shower handcuffed, there's one in front, one behind. If you so much as look at another prisoner or signal to another prisoner, we're just going to grab your skull from behind and smash your teeth into the concrete.
Wow.
So it is high, intense environment. Yeah, definitely.
Wow, that is stressful. So obviously you're living in an environment where I would imagine you're fearing for your safety, you're fearing for your life, not just from the other dangerous prisoners, but from the guards, a lot of ways you can get sick. It's amazing that you made it through that, and congratulations on straightening out your life. People can go to your website, ShaunAttwood.com. You've written a number of books, you're a podcaster, and you've got a very popular YouTube channel. One of the reasons I wanted to invite you on today, Shaun, is that part of what I like to do on Crowdsource the Truth is not just have pundits who, you know, give us their opinion of what might have happened. You've got a lot of firsthand insight into how these type of jailhouse suicides, jailhouse attacks, how these different things transpire, and you've been doing a lot of broadcasts about this really strange, highly dubious Jeffrey Epstein suicide that just happened almost 1 week ago. What can you tell us about what you've learned so far, what your personal opinion is, and what we can glean from what we've been told by the authorities so far?
Life is cheap in prison. There are people so desperately addicted to drugs, they will kill someone for $50 worth of heroin. Now, if you're going to kill someone in the prison system, an ideal method is to make it look like a suicide. So there's various ways prisoners kill themselves. There is the strangulation, there's the hanging, there's the slashing of the wrists, there's the overdosing on medication, there's what's called a hot shot, whereby the gang, if they know you use drugs, they just hold you down and give you an overdose of heroin. Guard finds you, and it just looks like a routine thing. So if you were going to kill somebody in prison, hanging is probably one of the most common ways that happen that are suicides. But looking at Epstein's injuries, the hyoid was broken, 2 places in the neck were broken, and that's more commonly associated with homicide and strangulation. But it overlaps with suicide as well. So if you were an assassin and you were looking to use a method that, the coroner could say there is a possibility of suicide, that's a method that you're going to go with. And that appears to be the case with Epstein. All of the people that could have supervised him were taken away. He was on suicide watch prior to the suicide. There was a situation with his cellmate, and if you look at that Nicholas guy, the size of him, this ex-cop had murdered 4 drug dealers over a 5-kilo deal.
Wow.
The drug dealers were lured into a bar that belonged to Nicholas's Tartaglione's brother, and they ended up buried in this ex-cop's backyard.
Wow.
And if you look at the size of this guy, he's an absolute beast. Now, there are so many murders in prison of cellmates by cellmates. When I was housed in Arizona Department of Corrections, a mandate came down that it was going to be enforced, whereby cellmates were going to be housed with cellmates with like crimes to prevent these cellmate on cellmate murders. Now, if you were going to put 2 people together that was going to create a murder that was guaranteed, that would be someone who's just committed a mass murder and a prolific sex offender. These guys don't mix. So my 2 theories are presently that Nicholas was brought in just because of the prison rules. This guy would possibly just take it upon himself to kill Epstein. The other theory is that Nicholas was brought in as the actual hitman to kill Epstein, and that hit failed. Nicholas had access to cell phones. He was actually caught with a cell phone at some point. He's obviously got connections in the underworld through these drug transactions. If you're dealing up to 5 kilos at a time, you've got some pretty serious connections. And there's like an intersection of the mafia and the political class. So someone like him, who's also from law enforcement, has got that background. He's at that intersection of the mafia and the political class. He's ideally placed to take Epstein out.
Yeah. Now, Shaun, when you say prison rules, you're not talking about the official rules of the federal facility. You're saying the unspoken code among prisoners that a murderer will kill a pedophile.
When you go into prison, there are 2 sets of rules. There are the guards rules. You get a little booklet from the prison with all the guards rules. And there is also something called the convict code. Now, where I was housed in Arizona, a chomo, a pedophile, a snitch, these were at the lowest level of the hierarchy, and they were called KOS, kill on sight. So gang members, people who uphold that convict code, murderers, some of the murderers are the most respected and have got, the most power to do these things, or power over people, generally will apply that convict code if they get put in a cell with someone that's committed sex offences. It's a no-brainer in prison. You can ask anyone who's been to prison, they will tell you that.
And there's a lot of people, a lot of malicious social engineers on YouTube who think it's funny or clever to toss around allegations that this or that person is associated with a pedophile or engaged in pedophilia. It's such a serious allegation to level against someone. I think that people doing it really need to consider what they're doing, because if something goes the wrong way and that rumor gets around, somebody insane like Nicholas Tartaglione could really act on something like that, and the results would be horrifying. Now, let's talk for a minute about this the Metropolitan Correction Center where Jeffrey Epstein was held. This is not a prison. This is a federal jail where criminals are placed while they await trial. It does contain some pretty intense characters. How did this Tartaglione get a cell phone? That seems like it would be so wildly outside the rules of what you're allowed to have inside prison. Are you allowed to possess any electronics?
Anything that you possess outside of the property that the guards give you when you first go in is classified as contraband, can be confiscated, destroyed, and you will be subject to sanctions in the prison system for possessing this. Now, that creates a huge black market in illegal goods. So, items that go at premiums are drugs, of course. 90% of the guys I was housed with shooting up heroin, shooting up meth. So, the absolute priority of the gangs are the drugs business in the prison system. How do you run a drugs business effectively? Because you can't just go on the phone in the jail and call in an order, because the jail is recording all of your conversations. So if you can get a cell phone into the prison, then these really do go at premiums, because you can continue to run your criminal enterprise. And there are drug dealers in prisons who are saying they're making more money selling drugs to prisoners than they were selling drugs to people before they were arrested. And cell phones completely facilitate this.
So people in the chat right now, Shaun, are telling us that perhaps a guard or a lawyer would get that over to the ex-cop. I know you were following him quite closely. What have you learned recently about this guy, Tartaglione? He buried 4 dead guys in his backyard. Him and his brother were, setting up these drug dealers. Wasn't Tartaglione somehow involved in the drug dealing?
Yeah, Tartaglione, he was a cop until about 2008. There was a situation where a case came about and they accused him of some kind of fabrication. He got proven innocent of that, but they fired him anyway because of some kind of technicality. So roll the clock forward now to 2016. This is when he's getting arrested for these murders. Now, if you're a police person, you have the power to decide who's going to deal in your jurisdiction and decide which dealers you're going to arrest to satisfy your arrest quotas. So from being a cop, he already understands the mechanics of how things work. He's already got all of these contacts. So he moved into large-scale drug trafficking himself. And the one deal that, the guys got murdered over was 5 kilos of cocaine.
And forgive my ignorance, but what's the money value of that 5 kilos of cocaine?
I used to be able to get a kilo of cocaine from the cartels out of Mexico. I had operations in Mexico for about $12,000 of pure stuff. So the price has come down considerably since Pablo Escobar's days in the 1970s, when it was $60,000 for a kilo of cocaine.
Well, still, the guy's obviously engaged in some pretty serious crimes. I personally find it particularly reprehensible when a police officer engages in this type of activity, because they are people that we bestow the public trust in. They're intended to uphold the law, and as you've said, they've got the contacts, the evidence room stuff, they know who to do what to get this sort of thing to go through. It's like the most insidious type of crime we could imagine. And we've heard that this guy's got a cell phone. He didn't hear Epstein screaming because he's got earbuds. What the hell is going on in this prison or this jail that the guy's got everything? Earbuds would seem to have a wire, right?
When I was in some prisons, the inmates would, after lockdown, 8 o'clock, and then lights out, 10 o'clock. Sometimes the inmates are yelling at each other into the night. So I would get wet toilet paper, wrap plastic around it, and shove it right into my ears, because you couldn't just buy earbuds. It wasn't on the commissary list. Perhaps it's available where he's housed, but I'm not aware of it. I never experienced it. So even with these earbuds shoved into my ears, prisoners are yelling so loud from cell to cell, I still could not get to sleep. So I ended up just deciding I was going to work out for as long as they yelled, rather than get mad and use this time productively somehow. So if someone's getting murdered or attacked, you're going to hear that over and above anything.
You know, you've raised a good point. Perhaps I misunderstood the report. When I heard earbuds, I was thinking of, you know, like iPod headphones, but you rightly point out that it could have been sort of makeshift ear plugs. But either way, I agree, he would have heard something. A lot of people have been wondering if Jeffrey Epstein is even dead. We've seen this photo from the New York Post of him being wheeled on a gurney into the hospital with a respirator bulb or something. Clearly seems like they're trying to resuscitate him. But then I saw another photo where it looks like prison guards or prison medics are wheeling him out in a body bag. So is this the same Epstein?
I got really lucky because what caused my videos to go viral was a week before the murder, let's say, I posted a video saying, will Clinton have Epstein murdered in prison to, you know, prevent this Lolita scandal? And spookily enough, hours before that was announced, that video started to spike up in the views. It started to go viral in the night. And my belief is, coming after that now, that I believe that he was going to die because of him having contacts with high-profile political, high-profile business people, high-profile celebrities all over the world, some of whom used his services on this pedophile island and on his flight, including the Clintons. And I've written books about the war on drugs. I wrote a book called American Made about Barry Seal, and that is how I came to understand the Clinton body count. And that's why I got expertise on the history of the Clintons and the methods they employ, such from Don Ives and Kevin Henry to Vince Foster.
Yeah.
So the reason I don't think that he has been allowed to live, I mean, there was rumors about Kenneth Lay that, you know, he's going to get facial surgery and he was going to be allowed to live. None of these guys get the day in court because that opens the can of worms. The reason I don't believe he's been allowed to live is because he's just one player in a grand conspiracy. And if you murder one player in the grand conspiracy, that sets a precedent to anyone else who is going to either get arrested or come forward to testify about those people. They know they're going to have a murder coming. So it's the ultimate deterrent. If they gave Epstein a pass and just did the surgery and sent him to New Zealand, you know, that's not enough of a deterrent, I don't believe, for these other people. So the ultimate deterrent is death.
Interesting. I think you're correct, and we have spoken quite a bit about the Clinton body count. Of course, Vince Foster, the young boys on the tracks in Arkansas, Ron Brown. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I've got a regular show on Tuesdays with Larry Nichols, and he describes in great detail the hallmarks of an Arkancide, and definitely the Epstein death matches that. I've been yesterday and today trying to get in touch with Nicholas Biazzi, the Department of Justice Public Information Officer, who gave me his business card when I went down to the Municipal Correction Center last Saturday when it was announced that Epstein had died. He's taken to no longer answering his phone. The voicemail is full. He's not responding to text messages. He always says no comment, and the medical examiner's office has refused to return requests for copies of the autopsy. So there's a lot of questions swirling. No official press conference other than William Barr stating that he's appalled that Epstein was killed. What, if anything, do you think William Barr has to do with this? We know that he was very close to George H.W. Bush. He was very tied to the Iran-Contra scandal, which you've written quite a bit about in American Made. What do you think about William Barr?
Well, in American Made, I wrote about how the CIA was bringing in drugs to finance this illegal war in Nicaragua. Congress had ruled against it, so they were doing this covertly. So the flights that Barry Seal were doing, for example, it was cocaine in and weapons out on these same military flights. And then the cash was getting laundered through Arkansas. There was so much cash in the banks back then that you know, it spiked off the scale. Now, Larry Nichols, people say, some of this stuff is conspiratorial, but where are we getting all this information from? We're getting information from people like the state troopers, the Arkansas police, who were guarding the Clintons, because Bill Clinton, as governor of Arkansas, he was providing state security to that drug trafficking operation. Bush, he had the power in the Reagan-Bush administration, and Oliver North was the guy who was, coordinating, bringing in these drug transactions. So Larry Nichols, he was working for the Clintons as part of this scheme. So he knew all about Rose Law Firm. He knew all about how the money was getting laundered through the Arkansas development, whatever, that Bill Clinton said was going to create jobs for the economy and boost, employment. So Larry Nichols started to see all of what was going on. And then, he came out and blew the whistle. Now people have tried to isolate him and say he's a conspiracy theorist, but that is the absolute trajectory of what happens with anyone who blows the whistle on these guys. They try and criminalize them, because if you criminalize a witness, then they don't have their testimony in court is considered unsound, so it can't be used against them. And with Epstein, if you go back to his first case 10 years ago, he got that sweetheart deal for prostitution. So by saying it was a prostitution case, what did that make the victims? Made them prostitutes.
Right.
That was a way that they were trying to criminalize the victims so they couldn't use their testimonies in court. So there's an absolute pattern of this, and anyone who blows the whistle on these guys, who's at a high level, they need to be careful what they're going up against, because they're putting their lives on the line.
Absolutely. You've raised an interesting point. You said that it sounds a bit conspiratorial, and we know that since the days of the JFK assassination, there was a direct edict from the CIA that basically said anybody who tries to challenge the official story, we're going to call them a conspiracy theorist. And I think today, in modern, whether we're talking about the United Kingdom, where you are right now, the United States or elsewhere, anybody who speaks English, the term conspiracy theory has essentially become equal to false. Someone says, oh, that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but in fact, Jeffrey Epstein, one of the charges against him was conspiracy.
Well, I had a charge of conspiracy. I'll explain what that means in a minute. I recently had David Icke on my podcast. Oddly enough, just before this interview, I just got his new book in the mail here today. Quick plug for David.
Nice.
I'm getting to read that in advance about 9/11. So what is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is when two or more people come together to come up with some joint action that's going to cause some kind of harm. In my case, it was a conspiracy case. I had over 100 co-defendants. So I became liable for any of the other actions of those co-defendants, even if I didn't know them. A conspiracy has a hub, and I was at the center of the hub. And then you got all these spokes going out to all these other co-conspirators. So the situation with Epstein, these other co-conspirators, if they come forward, they can reopen the legal liability in the court system. And that's what got Epstein killed, and that's what the other co-conspirators are absolutely terrified of. So Madam Maxwell, for example, who was procuring the women,
right?
I was reading about her right now, and she had a boyfriend out of Massachusetts. He's just shut his house up, and I think he's left the country, said she's not here, I'm just getting the hell out of here, please don't raid my home, kind of thing. She has a property in London, and I believe that property has been mobbed by the press. Nobody can find her there. There's rumors that perhaps she's in France. So she comes from this extremely powerful family. One of the very first high-profile suspicious deaths I ever heard of growing up in this country was the death of Robert Maxwell, because Robert Maxwell and Rupert Murdoch were the two huge media tycoons. So Robert Maxwell, all of a sudden, he just mysteriously dies while he's out at sea.
Yeah.
So this is a powerful family. I believe that he looted over 100 million from the pension fund from his workers. So the Maxwells, they got money, they're connected. If you look in the Black Book, I've posted a series of videos on my YouTube channel naming all the names in Epstein's Black Book. There's almost 100 pages of it. And for the Maxwells, they have got the highest category in the Black Book. There's not just little paragraphs on them like there are for the other people. There's like over a page of just Maxwell. So there's like, must be over 100 phone numbers on there. So the evidence from the Black Book is showing that within the conspiracy, because in a conspiracy, everybody has a letter in order of importance. So in my conspiracy, I was letter A, Wild Woman was letter B, Wild Man was letter C, and so on and so on. So Madam Maxwell, I imagine right now, the authorities would have her as letter B in this grand conspiracy. So she's a target for elimination, and she's also a target for the prosecutors to find her as fast as possible before she gets killed, so she can, she can give her statement to try and mitigate her own sentence, because hopefully she's going to get sentenced at the end of the day. She was out on the streets finding underage girls, telling them, you get $300 if you come back to this house and give this wealthy businessman a massage. And that was the hook. That's how they got the girls in. And once they'd hooked some of these girls, it was like a pyramid scheme. They had the girls going out and recruiting their friends and other people. It's really sad.
It is terrible. And I was just showing a brief clip the other day. I was watching, you were calling some of the phone numbers from the unredacted Epstein Black Book. You tried Mick Jagger and a few people. It really is a who's who of famous individuals. But of course, I think we all want to live in a world, or at least in the United States, where the Constitution grants us this right, where we're innocent until proven guilty. So simply Jeffrey Epstein having somebody's phone number doesn't implicate them, but it's not too good. Now, you brought up a lot of facts about Ghislaine Maxwell, which I agree with. I don't know if you were aware of this, but she was spotted, I think, yesterday at an In-N-Out Burger, literally walking distance from my old house in Los Angeles. She's hardly in hiding. She's not at all worried about her safety, about being arrested. I mean, if the FBI and the Department of Justice can't find her, they should just go order an animal-style burger with chili fries, and she's going to be right there.
Well, people are still spotting Elvis all over the world, so let's see how legitimate that source is.
I think she admitted it was her.
Really? Well,
yes.
she's not long for getting apprehended then.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, it's a really curious situation that she would just, so brazenly come out in public and sit there to be photographed. It almost doesn't make sense. And you also mentioned her father, Robert Maxwell, who many people believe was a Mossad agent or a Mossad asset. It's remarkable how his death mimics that of Jeffrey Epstein, in that he's this super rich guy who just suddenly commits suicide, or at least that's how it was officially reported. Maxwell jumped off of his yacht and was, face down, drowned. He was, as you pointed out, he was looting the pension fund. Was it the Mirror that he had purchased?
Yeah, he owned the Mirror. If the deep state is going to take someone out, I mean, I've looked at all of the various methods of killing people employed by the CIA. I was writing about the methods they went after Castro, putting explosives in cigars, putting poisons in cigars. They knew where he went deep sea diving. They were putting explosives in seashells. I'm surprised they didn't train the fish to try and hunt him down and kill him somehow. So, the levels of creativity employed by the intelligence agencies. And we're talking about the deep state, the Clintons, Bush. With the Clinton and Bush crime families being in power for so long, and Bush was the youngest ever head of the CIA. These guys are deeply ingrained. So basically, the CIA is one of the enforcement arms of the deep state. So every method in the world would have been put on the table and screened, and they would have come down with the ultimate thing that would look like a suicide, that would minimize, people crying out if, when there was an investigation.
I think you might find this amazing, Shaun, but Ghislaine Maxwell, as she sat at In-N-Out Burger just off of Lancashire Boulevard in the 101, she was reading the Book of Honor, The Secret Lives and Deaths of CIA Operatives. So I wonder if she's not searching that book for perhaps some advice for what she should be doing next.
Well, she can hire my friend Wildman as a bodyguard.
Yeah, Wildman
is
very
he's a big guy,
entertaining.
but he would never protect anyone who was involved with sex offences. He would more likely try and kill them.
Yeah, and it's really always entertaining to view your videos, your interviews with Wildman. You know, Crowdsource the Truth viewers who might not be familiar with you should go over to your YouTube channel and subscribe to the Shaun Attwood YouTube channel. Wildman he's obviously one of your closest friends. I believe he was an enforcer in your operation, right?
Yes, but I never actually had him. People who owed me money, the biggest threat was Wildman would move in with them. If Wildman moved in with you, he just wouldn't leave. He would liquidate your entire house. Basically, it would just be non-stop parties. He would just invite over Russian gangsters, Mexican gangsters, transvestites, street prostitutes, crackheads, gangbangers. And this would just be going on 24 hours a day. And in the end, you just give up in despair and try and find the money to pay me somehow to end your misery. Most of the people he moved in with, they moved out of the house pretty quickly.
It's really an unconventional approach to kingpinning, if that's what you call it. But I got to say, Shaun, it's so strange I can't imagine you as a so-called drug kingpin because you seem like such an intelligent, gregarious guy. How did that go?
I'm not like the traditional drug trafficker like Escobar, violence and like the cartels, all this horrific stuff that they do. My philosophy was, if you commit violence in the drug business, that takes your crimes from lower level felonies to higher level felonies. You attract the police attention and, they're going to take you down. So if you can promote harmony in your organization, then you're going to get away with things for longer. And that's what we did. I had over 100 people arrested with me. Only 4 agreed to cooperate with the authorities. Sammy the Bull, he was my competitor in the Ecstasy market. His guys lured one of my guys to a nightclub in Scottsdale, saying they were going to buy drugs from him, took him into the men's room and smashed his teeth out. So things got scary around that point, and Sammy the Bull got arrested, and I got arrested a year or so after that.
Yeah, and you talk extensively about this on your YouTube channel and also on your Patreon channel. People can go over to patreon.com/Shaun Attwood. And do you have special content on the Patreon channel that is not on the YouTube channel?
No, it was just basically a way, because a lot of my true crime podcasts were demonetized.
Right.
All my Epstein videos are immediately demonetized. So I've invested a lot in the channel, a lot in the true crime podcast. I interview a guy for 2 hours, got it up to 2 a week at one point. With the money coming from Patreon right now, I'm covering a couple a month, but I'm trying to do up to 10 a month. So if people do want to support the channel, I've got Patreon, I've got Just Giving. You can become a member on my YouTube channel. I've got PayPal. So all those are the methods that kind people from all over the world have helped keep everything going at the rate it's been going. So big shout out and a big thank you to everyone who's been contributing to the channel. You guys are great.
Yeah, I think Patreon is going to become more and more important. I've really focused on Patreon quite a bit because the videos that I do on Crowdsource the Truth are also frequently getting demonetized or not even allowed to be monetized. We're talking about things that, advertisers don't want getting out, or they would be on the mainstream news. And as I said, we don't want to just talk to some psychologist or some lawyer person who's telling us what they think happened. You're giving us detailed insights. And anytime we have some kind of billionaire organization like Google or CNN or Fox News, and they are financially supported by other billionaires who are advertising, they've got a stranglehold on the editorial content that can be presented. So what I've attempted to do with Crowdsource the Truth is give people the opportunity to select content that they want to see, and they can do that by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And as I said, I think it's going to become increasingly important. You probably heard the news about this guy, Zach Voorhees, who came forward and said that Google is actively manipulating the news, the data, the searches to create this sort of artificial reality of what people believe. And you've written tons of books about the war on drugs, the prison industrial complex. This is not the type of stuff that the mainstream news puts out. They want everybody to think that Bill Clinton is a fantastic guy.
Yeah, and before I answer that question, all of the people who are watching this video on my channel right now, there is a link, there's a pinned comment, and if you look in the description box, at the top of the description box, there's a link asking people to kindly go over to your channel, Jason, and subscribe to your channel. So let's help your subscribers grow as well, because we've all got to support each other in this battle against demonetization, getting the truth out there, you know, exposing what's really going on in the world. So, you know, back yeah, you're welcome. Back to the Clintons then. So I started writing my life story as a book. It was Party Time, Hard Time, Prison Time. It's a trilogy. And it took me 10 years to do that. So then I thought, all right, what am I going to write about next? I've been writing about the prison system, but the war on drugs is part of the prison system. It's a result of the prison system. So I started to research the war on drugs, and the big names that came up over and over again were Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, Pablo Escobar, Barry Seal, the Cali Cartel. So these are the people I focused on for my next books. Now, the Clintons waged this war on drugs, locked up hundreds of thousands of non-violent drug offenders. Now, if you look at the testimonies I'm relying on for Clinton's involvement in drug use and drug trafficking, again, these come from the Arkansas state troopers, from his own bodyguards, who blew the whistle years later. And they said that Bill Clinton was chronically taking cocaine so badly he damaged his nasal septum. He went down to the hospital. Hillary shows up at the hospital, threatens all of the staff, and says, basically, if anyone in here says anything about Bill's drug use, you know, your careers are going to be completely ruined. Roger Clinton was arrested in a cocaine deal. Bill Clinton had saved Roger Clinton on his previous offenses. It enabled him to walk, but the undercovers on this operation knew that would happen again, so they made sure they put the information in the public domain, and Roger Clinton would have to do some prison time. He did a short sentence, not like these black guys, small amounts of crack, serving life sentences. Roger Clinton did a short sentence, and then later on, Bill Clinton pardoned him. So how could someone who's chronically abusing cocaine and is providing the state protection, the police protection for the drugs coming in to Maine, Arkansas, that Barry Seal was flying in, how could someone then become the president and lock up hundreds of thousands of non-violent drug users, devastate entire families? These incarcerations are notoriously falling on the poorest people in society, the people who've been traumatized as young people and are going through such hardships, and then they're scraping money together to go and visit their family members in prison. I saw this day in, day out. These elites taking drugs themselves, brutalizing and profiting from the most poor people in the country. And that just blew my mind as well. And that's why I'm on this mission to expose it. That created the private prisons, the prison industrial complex, you know, continued by Bush, continued by Obama. Every single president continues it. These contracts are in the tens of billions of dollars a year. And I believe now there's an inflection point in society. The public is getting sick of it, because in the 70s and 80s, Reagan started to make people afraid of drugs. People didn't really care about it before Carter. It wasn't a big issue. And it got to the point where you looked at someone who was involved with drugs and you thought they were an extremely bad person. But when I got into prison, I saw the average arrest was a black kid or a Mexican kid with a little bit of weed. And if you look at the statistics for America for arrests, hundreds of thousands of people getting arrested for weed possession. It was the biggest arrest category in the history of criminal justice. And that's how they ended up filling these private prisons up. And people say to me, Shaun, you don't just put people in prison for weed possession. I recently visited the hemp museum, the cannabis museum in Amsterdam. And I took pictures of all of these facts and these photos, and they show all the people serving life sentences in America for weed possession under 3 strikes laws. So you got political pedophiles like Epstein. they get sweetheart deals, and you've got people, 3 strikes laws, weed possession, serving life sentences. What kind of justice is that?
It's not justice, it's injustice. And, I don't know if you were aware of this. I suspect you probably are. But Dick Cheney was actually charged for prison profiteering in the state of Texas. He was one of the owners or on the board or a stockholder or something like that of Core Civic, which used to be Corrections Corporation of America. I mean, the notion that a prison would be a profit center seems directly contradictory to serving justice. It's a major problem. Were the prisons that you were in, any of them for-profit prisons? Or, I mean, they're all essentially for profit, right? The states get money to have people in there.
If you're going to cross Cheney, he's going to take you duck hunting and you might just get shot.
Exactly.
The prison industrial complex is an offshoot of the military industrial complex. This is all about profiteering, and they're all completely tied together with the oil and the defense companies and the pharmaceutical companies, because the military and the prisons are the 2 biggest customers of prescription pills, I believe, or 2 of the biggest. They're in the top 10.
Wow.
So if you're in a private prison, the deal is this. The prisons get $50,000 a year of taxpayers' money per prisoner. That's how it was when I got arrested. It's a lot more now.
Wow. And
the contracts the state signed, they would get paid even if the beds weren't full.
Wow.
Can you believe that? $50,000 for an empty bunk?
Mm.
So the person who's the governor of the state of Arizona, he signs this deal with Corrections Corporation of America. And then when he quits his job as governor of Arizona, he goes and works for Corrections Corporation of America and gets all these stock options and sweetheart stock deals. And it's all a complete shakedown on the taxpayers. Now, if it's not a private prison and you're in charge of a state prison, you still have a huge budget. So what you do is you put your buddies in charge of providing commissary items that the inmates can buy. You put your buddies in charge of providing telephone services to the prisoners. Telephone services to prisoners, it's a $500 million to $1 billion a year industry. I made a call home to my family, 5-minute call, and they charged them, I think it was about $70 for that call.
Whoa.
That was back to England. A local call in America, looking at like $10 to $20 for a 10-minute call. So everywhere you turn, they're making money off you. And they're telling the public prisoners are pedophiles, murderers, rapists. We've got to lock them up and throw away the key. But in reality, when I got in there, it was the criminalization of addiction. It was low-level drug users. They had the lowest hanging fruit for the police to arrest, to make their arrest quotas. Have you watched this video that's gone viral on Vice magazine's website? It shows a baby-faced undercover cop going into a school. He gives an autistic kid $20 and he says, look, go and buy me some weed. The kid buys some weed, and they do this to 20 plus kids. And at the end of the investigation, 20 plus people are arrested, and the headline news is dangerous drug gang arrested, dealing crack, heroin, all this to school kids. All the kids that were arrested, more than half of them were special needs, and the rest were ethnic minorities. Why on earth would the police do this to young people? Vice magazine researched it, and they said the more arrests they make, the more federal funding they get under the war on drugs. So there's an incentive for the cops to be arresting the easiest people. I'm a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. These are the good cops who are speaking out about this stuff. Judges, prosecutors, not all law enforcement are bad. There's some good people out there working the system. We need the system, to protect us from the psychopaths like Epstein. So these guys say we joined, to arrest the bad guys, but I was assigned to infiltrate a student group, get them smoking weed, and arrest them all at the end of the investigation, just so we could fill these private prisons up. It's completely sick. And since this has been going on, the rate at which murders are solved in America has been steadily going down, because the police resources are all taken up wiretapping drug dealers and trying to arrest as many of their customers as possible.
I mean, it seems like entrapment, what you're describing.
It's a pyramid scheme, just like Epstein had his pyramid scheme of recruiting girls, the private prisons, the politicians are in it. It's just a pyramid scheme, and they have to constantly feed off new victims as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I believe this is a driving force in why weed is getting decriminalized in America and legalized, because people are sick of their kids getting busted. They can't get jobs with criminal records. They go into prison where they could get raped, they could get murdered.
Right.
They're going to get recruited by Nazi gangs. They're going to get them shooting up heroin. They're going to get swastika tattoos on their foreheads. The gang knows if they put a swastika on your forehead, you go to a job interview, you're not going to get it. You're going to come right back to the gang. The prison knows if they allow it to be gang and drug-infested mayhem and don't give these guys any job skills and don't rehabilitate them, they give them $50 on the gate, say, have a nice day, they know they're going to come right back to prison. So it's all designed for young people to fail, and they are the ingredients, the fodder for evil people like Dick Cheney and all these other corporate elites that you mentioned.
You know, I want to ask you something about that, Shaun, because I have another regular guest that I speak to, David Hawkins, who's spoken about the speculative possibility that prison-based hit gangs are put together. I don't know if this would even be something that, as a prisoner, you'd be aware of, but David talks about the possibility that JPATs, the Joint Prisoner, the Con Air thing, where they fly prisoners around in jets, that theoretically this could be used to take psychopathic prisoners, somebody along the line of Nicholas Tartaglione, transport them to a location secretly, have them kill someone, put them back in prison, and then suddenly you've got a perfect alibi. This guy was in jail. He's a murderer, doesn't mind killing people, raping people. You give him some heroin, you give him a reduced sentence or whatever. Have you any firsthand knowledge that something like that might actually be happening?
Don't underestimate the reach of the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang. When I went into the Arizona jail, the Aryan Brother torpedoes, the low-level people, come up to me right away because they want to know what you're in for. It's called a charge check. So you got to show them your paperwork right away. Some charges are KOS by the gang, kill on sight, chomo stuff, pedophile stuff. Even a drive-by shooting might get you a beat down because women and kids sometimes get hit. Now, I've interviewed on my true crime podcast some guys who were in Folsom prison back in the day, who were in San Quentin prison back in the day, talking like 70s, 80s here. They explained the history of how these prison gangs started. So in the beginning, Aryan Brotherhood prison gang, the whites a minority in the California prison system, heavy black prison population, again to do with the racism, to do with the war on drugs. And the blacks, and I'm not being racist here, but what I noticed in prison is that whatever race was the majority would brutalize the race that was the minority. So if whites were the minority back then, they were getting brutalized by the blacks. There was a lot of raping going on. So the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang started with the notion, we're going to have these soldiers now that are going to stand up for the white race, and we're not going to allow this to happen. But over the years, as drug illegalization made worthless plants more valuable than gold, biggest, profit opportunity in history of the world for criminals, all criminal entities end up, pretty much all of them that I'm aware of, end up trafficking drugs. It's their major revenue source. So the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang now is a massive drugs and murder for hire business. And if the Aryan Brotherhood have got white dudes all over the country spread out, and something goes down in the state and they need someone taken out, this isn't just in the prison system. This is spilled out onto the streets. I watched a documentary that said that the Italian mafia now were recruiting the Aryan Brotherhood to perform the hits on the streets because they're considered the absolute most cold-blooded killers. And if you watch Breaking Bad, they didn't address them as the Aryan Brotherhood. Right. But, it showed towards the end series, it showed some people, characters who were based, I believe they were based around that gang. Also, if you look at the number one causes of murder in the UK, the people behind those, Aryan Brotherhood has become a leading cause of murder throughout the entire country. So, this is a mafia that's been created by the prison system that's spilled out nationwide, and pretty much they can have anyone they want taken out across the country,
Amazing. And it's an
in or
international.
in or out of the prison system.
And it's got an international reach. That's really stunning. I don't know if people were aware of that. So, I mean, I don't mean to get too personal, but how are you able to avoid some of these horrendous attacks in prison, or did you?
Okay, everybody I have written about in my books, Party Time, Before Prison, and Hard Time, in Prison Time, all available on Amazon. And the link is in the description box below this video if anyone's interested in them, paperback, ebook, audio. In those books, I've had to contact absolutely every single person I've written about, have them sign legal papers to say it's all authentic. They wouldn't sue me, wouldn't sue the publisher. So I've written about things to a degree whereby what I'm writing about is not going to get anybody in trouble. I had a cellmate called Joe when I was in maximum security in the Madison Street Jail, Phoenix, Arizona, back in 2003, 2004. Now, nearly everybody was in the maximum pod I was housed was a murderer, and it was divided racially. And the white gang, I've been in there for a year now. I walk up to the white gang, the table, the first day I'm in, doing the prison walk, talking the slang, wondering whether they're going to accept me or whether they're going to brutalize me. So the leader, he just looks at me. He's like, stand at the end of the table. You can eat, but you can't sit down. And I just stood there, ate with them, went back to my cell. And now I'm crapping it back in my cell. I'm thinking, what's these guys' impression of me? What's going to happen next? And that guy, the head murderer, came to my cell hours later with all of his legal paperwork, handed it over to me and said, I want you to read my case and tell me what you think. So they saw right through my tough guy act, my prison walk, and my slang to see that I was an educated man, a resource to them. And that's how I survived prison, perhaps differently from a lot of people, because I used my education as a currency. So there were situations with the gang, but I was teaching the Mexicans. Some of them didn't know how to write home in Spanish. So I was teaching them how to write home in Spanish. This was in the exact same pod that I just described with the murderers. And then the Aryan Brotherhood, they were wondering whether to have me smashed for helping another race because there's all these rules of racial division. But my cellmate, Joe, he was an independent, tough guy. He had the respect of the gang. He'd been a crystal meth chemist. He'd done some business with them. And he basically told me, I've got you a pass on this. The light is off. They're not going to smash you. You've been authorized to continue to teach the Mexicans. So there's so much you could say. And if you name any names and give examples of specific deals, things that could get people indicted, things that, the police are going to be contacting you. There's no statute of limitation on murders, violent crimes, things like that. In all my books, everybody's names are changed. There's no real names, nicknames. It's all gone through legal departments and stuff like that. So as far as I'm aware, the AB don't have a problem with what I've written.
Wow. It's an amazing story that you've got, Shaun. And we've heard from other people who have been in prison that if you can type, if you can help people write legal documents, that's a major factor where they protect you and don't want anything to happen to you. So we've got just a few minutes left here. I wanted to get back a bit to Mr. Epstein before we wrap it up. I'm sure you've seen this bizarre painting of Bill Clinton in what was initially thought to be the Monica Lewinsky blue dress, but now it turns out this is actually a blue dress that was worn by Hillary to an event at the Kennedy Center. And Kevin Shipp, the former CIA agent who appears with me every Thursday on the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp, has identified this book on the bookshelf, which is that's a picture of John F. Kennedy on the book. This is a book about the Kennedy assassination. Have you seen this painting before? What do you make of this?
I've got two observations. I haven't seen it before, but I've got a gut reaction. So you've got Bill doing the Hillary dress look, and I think that represents the fact that Hillary is the true mafia figure in that relationship. I read a book called Partners in Power. I've read Hillary's The Clintons' War Against Women. And when Bill was having all these affairs with all these women and rape cases, were coming about in later years, when he was having all of these affairs with these women, Hillary tracked the women down, not to ostracize Bill for him. I found out who these women are. You've been cheating on me, that kind of thing. She tracked them down to send henchmen to their houses to scare the living daylights out of them so that they would not say anything to impede their ascension to power, to the political throne, to the presidency. So that's my first reaction about that. Now, you're talking about the Kennedy assassination. I discussed that with David Icke on my podcast recently, and I believe that there was a triangulation of assassins. The hit had come down from the deep state, complex reasons to do with oil taxation, said he was going to break the CIA up into pieces. More reasons than that, though. There's complex reasons. You got these mafia dynasties, rivals fighting against each other. So if you look at the actual video now, his head jolts one way, jolts the other, jolts this way, piece of his head flies off onto the car. His wife scrambles onto the car, grabs it. She actually took that piece of his head to the hospital. She was in shock. So my research has led me to believe that it was a triangulation. There's no way that the guy they said did it, his gun would have even worked. It was some like $1 gun.
Mannlicher Carcano.
Could barely even shoot. And that Barry Seal's wife said that Barry Seal flew the getaway plane for some of the hit team.
At the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know she had said that. I was aware that Judith Very Baker, who is the alleged lover of Lee Harvey Oswald, who I've met several times and interviewed several times, she said that Lee Harvey Oswald's true purpose was to be flown to Cuba and to deliver an injectable virus that was a form of cancer that she had developed with Alton Ochsner at Tulane University. Judith Baker was a cancer researcher who thought she was working to cure cancer, but then discovered she was being handled by the CIA to develop a weaponized version of cancer. And I find her story very credible. David Icke is a fascinating guy, and I agree with what you've just said about the Kennedy assassination. So it's interesting to note what the implications of this totally weird painting of Bill Clinton might be. I initially thought it was just, mocking Monica Lewinsky, which was bad enough, but perhaps it is some sort of signal to a hidden group. I mean, you've just told us about the Aryan Brotherhood, a pervasive gang with a lot of power that most people don't know anything about. Why should we doubt that there is a gang, a similar gang of government-style elites that have the power of nuclear weapons and war all over the world? The military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, the technological-industrial complex. We haven't even touched on Google and Facebook and the pervasive ways that they spy on all of us and monitor our lives. Shaun, we're just about out of time, and there's so much more for us to talk to. I would love to invite you back and have you for another conversation in the future. People should definitely visit ShaunAttwood.com, and if you haven't read Shaun's books, you can purchase them right there on the site, or if you prefer to buy from a CIA-controlled retailer, they're all available on Amazon.com. You can follow Shaun on Twitter. He is on Twitter at Shaun Attwood, and of course the most important and helpful thing that you can do is go visit Shaun over on patreon.com. You can sponsor his true crime podcast at patreon.com/Shaun Attwood, and of course Crowdsource the Truth is a viewer-sponsored resource, so please visit patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth or subscribestar.com/Crowdsource the Truth. We've got exclusive content showing up almost daily. Shaun, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Really delightful to meet you. You're such a nice guy. I can't imagine you as a drug kingpin. Anything you want to say before we close it out for today?
Jason, again, I'd just like to urge my followers and subscribers to go over to your channel and to subscribe to your channel and to support you in the fullest every way they can. I'd just like to thank you personally, for giving me this opportunity and asking me such great questions and being able to continue this discussion of Epstein. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go next. So from the heart, man, I wish you lots of success in your mission.
Thank you, Shaun. It's really kind of you to say. And people who are watching us on Shaun's YouTube channel can just search for Jason Goodman on YouTube and they'll find the Crowdsource the Truth channel. And likewise, Crowdsource the Truth viewers are going to want to head over to Shaun Attwood's YouTube channel. You're absolutely increasing the reach of the broadcast, Shaun. We've got almost 2,000 people watching on your channel, so thank you for that. And it's really, as I said, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Wonderful to get your insights, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Shaun Attwood, everybody, thanks for watching, and thanks for being with us, Shaun.
Take care, mate.
Bye-bye.